the fabulous Corey Gibson.
Hello, everyone.
And today we have a very special guest. We have the best attorney in Atlanta for personal injury and criminal cases. Yay! So we have
How you guys doing today?
We have Nathan Fitzpatrick in Atlanta, and before the podcast is over, we want to make sure that you give out your information because it is one of the most important things today, especially in today's society and how everything is going today, is have a good lawyer and know your lawyer.
Yeah.
You know, because when I was in Virginia, I did a lot of substance abuse programs. And so some of the times we would go to court, me and my pastor would go to court with people. And what bothered me the most is when we going into the attorney's office and we get ready to go to court, and the attorney will barely know the client's name. You just kicked out 10 G's. I just gave you 10 grand and you don't know my name. You should know my name for 10 grand. Yeah, so
right. Yeah, typically speaking, you should know your client very well, right?
yeah, exactly. You know, Nate, and I'm gonna call my brother Nate today. Yeah, instead of sir, you know what I mean? But Nate, but tell us about that. You know, tell us, especially and put some light in today's situation, today's political climate, and today's climate. What's some of the things that we need to know as the public that attorneys know?
Well, I think you need to know that life is fragile, first and foremost. As you have seen with current events and things that happen in the recent years, that you can have your life taken away from you in the blink of an eye. So, it's one thing I always keep in mind as I go through my life is just kind of understanding how fragile life is and how things can change. And when you kind of keep that in mind, you kind of can stay more in tune with the forces of nature that are out there against you. Because as African Americans, the forces that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis are a little different than what everyone else has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So once you kind of understand, life is fragile, there's a lot of hazardous individuals, hazardous forces, and hazardous things that can happen, then you can kind of transition into knowing how to navigate and how to navigate properly. So when you have interactions with the police, which are, when I was young, I was always told they were to protect and serve, right?
Right.
When you have interactions with the police, you can understand, as an African American, they may be here to protect and serve, but not necessarily to protect and serve you. So.
And Nate, you said something important, how to navigate. And we do some topics here about relationships. And one of the things about relationships, I say, everything you say in a relationship can and will be used against you in that relationship. And the same way with law, or you interacting with a police officer. So, some of the things that you say, tell us, our listening audience, some things to say or not to say. What can you, educate us on that?
Well, I definitely think it depends on the situation. If you're interacting with law enforcement from a traffic stop standpoint, you definitely want to understand why you're being stopped or why you're being pulled over, and try to do your best to calm the situation down, because it unfortunately is adversarial, right? A lot of the training that the police have received in the past couple of years is focused on kind of over aggressive policing, in my opinion. So, as us as individuals, we don't need to meet that tick for tack, you know what I mean? What we need to try to do is just kind of get an understanding and calm the situation down, especially if you're in a traffic stop, because they're on edge, especially with everything that's happened. We're on edge with everything that's happened. And if you get in contact with the police from on a street or pedestrian standpoint, just do your best to try to avoid any level of confrontation, but also, like you said, understand that if they're investigating you, they're looking to talk to you about something, you don't have to interact with them. Of course, if you're pulled over, you have to stop and, you know, get an understanding as to why they're stopping you. But if you're just walking down the street and the police, you know, call out to you, you know, typically speaking, you don't have to stop.
Yeah.
With you know, all of the different issues that we may have to come to a lawyer for and the things that we're talking about right now, trust is one of the things that hinders us from going to a lawyer or taking action. How do you instill that trust in your clients to ensure that, you know, they trust you to help them out in the situation?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the first questions I ask whenever I sit down with someone is, have you ever had to hire an attorney before? Or has an attorney ever been hired for you before? And really the reason I ask that question is because I'm trying to get an understanding as to whether or not this particular person understands attorney-client privilege and understands, you know, how that works. And as soon as they let me know if, you know, whether or not they've had an attorney, I immediately go into, well, do you understand that I'm your attorney? Even though, you know, someone else may have hired me, or even though I may be helping you navigate this situation, everything that we talk about is just between us. And just because you tell me these things doesn't mean I'm gonna tell your mother, father, brother, sister, cousin, husband, whoever, or law enforcement or the prosecutor about what we discuss. It's just between us. And then you and I would have to talk about strategy as to what things we do disclose and what things we don't disclose. And I think that's key to kind of generating and opening the door to, you know, having your client trust you. Because once they understand that, you know, you and me, we're in this thing together and I want to help you, but I need you to help me by making me knowledgeable of the situation. That allows them to kind of open up and let you know what you need to know so you can do your job effectively.
Absolutely, and that's why I said in the opening of the show that we would go and the attorneys wouldn't even know the client's name. To me, that attorney don't have that client's best interest in mind. And that's one of the reasons why I want to do this podcast, because I want, especially people in Atlanta, to know who to call. They can pick up the phone and call the best lawyer in Atlanta, Mr. Fitzpatrick here, and make sure that we give his information out. And if you're outside of the state, or you're in another state and you're in California, that you need to establish a relationship with that attorney, and that way you can know what to say and know to be upfront and honest with that attorney. It does you no good, and it does the attorney no good in defending you if you don't tell him the whole story. Because believe you me, they gonna figure out.
It's gonna come to light.
Absolutely, Corey.
Whatever happens in the dark,
Good, come to the light. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I've had some cases where my clients didn't tell me the full scoop, and then by the time the case was over with, it became a problem or an issue because the opposing side, in this case it was a criminal case, the opposing side had more information than I had, and then those things came into play when it came time for that particular client to be sentenced. It caused problems. And I've even had it come up in the civil setting when I've represented individuals in car accidents. They may have had prior injuries, prior accidents. And, when they're in this new case, they're complaining about the same injuries. Well, I need to know if you had a prior situation, you know what I mean? So I can navigate to, this is an aggravation of a pre-existing injury versus this is a brand new injury, right? So yeah, knowledge is key. You got to communicate with your lawyer, sure.
Exactly. And Nate and I was talking a little earlier today, about knowing the law. And I grew up in Louisville, Mississippi, and I always grew up in kind of hostile environments. Mm-hmm. And I always said the other man always knew the law better than me. You know what I mean? If anything happened, it seemed like the other man knows the law and how far to walk and how, what to do and what to say. So that's why it's so important that we understand the law. We get to know and be relaxed with our attorneys. Because so many times we may get charged and they trumped up charges. It just so happened today, I'm so glad he's here. My brother-in-law retired NYPD, and I just called him out. He just held his head back, and we was talking about stop and frisk yesterday. And so many times we can get caught up in legal situations, by just minding our own business, So go ahead, Cory.
You can finish.
Oh yeah, we get caught up in situations with stop and frisk, and so Mr. Fitzpatrick. So tell us if we get hemmed up in a situation like that, where they're trying to meet a quota, or you feel that, hey, I'm just going about my business. Why are you picking on me? Why are you stopping me? Why are you questioning me? What should we do in that situation?
Well, I want to hit on a few things. First and foremost, you don't have to stop. I mean, unless law enforcement has a reasonable, articulable suspicion, that's what the Constitution requires. They can't stop you. A reasonable, articulable suspicion is basically what it says. They have to articulate a reason why they're stopping you. And if they can't articulate a reason why they're stopping you, any sort of stop is unconstitutional. So if I'm walking down the street and the police say, hey man, come here, I can look at the police and just keep walking, unless there's some reason he can articulate as to why he needs me to come here. I don't have to go there. But I want to talk about what you said about how the other side seemed to feel like they knew the law. I think there's this situation that society has presented itself where the colored community has to know more law. Because there is no stop and frisk in the suburbs, right? And there's only stop and frisk in the minority community. So, just talk about this conversation by itself. Yeah, we would need to know our law and our constitutional rights as it pertains to stop and frisk. Middle class America would need to know that, right? Because there's no stop and frisk going on in their communities. So, it's also, we have to know the law, but we have to know more of the law in that, we are placed in positions where we come to face the law more often than our counterparts.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to go back and touch on something. You just talked about if a police officer happens to stop you, you don't have to stop and talk to them or unless they articulate. Now, me, I have a 19-year-old son. I am telling him to be respectful, answer questions, stop. I'm not, teaching him that, you don't have to stop, make them articulate, because I don't want any confusion. I would prefer that he adheres to what he's being asked. So talk to us about that, situation, kind of walking the line in those terms.
Yeah, it's a fine line. Definitely, it's a fine line between being cooperative and being respectful and enforcing your constitutional rights, right? That's a very fine line. So, yeah, so definitely you don't want to run, let's say in a situation where, someone were to call out to you and say, hey, come here. And then the individual would say, take it one step further. If you were to take off running, then all of a sudden they have a reason to stop you, right? Because the law basically says, running may be evidence of some sort of guilt. So I do respect what you're saying in that you want your child or individuals to be respectful of law enforcement. I guess my only concern is, when we make ourselves available, there are good cops and there are bad cops, and we make ourselves available. Sometimes that confrontation or that encounter can get led in the wrong direction. So, right. I just try to limit my interactions with law enforcement. For instance, I had a house, and there was something going on in my neighborhood, and law enforcement came to my home. Apparently, they were looking for somebody, and apparently, this individual they were looking for had run off into this neighborhood and run into this cul-de-sac where I just happened to be living. They knocked on my door, and they said, "Hey, we're looking for this individual. He ran in this direction. We feel like he might have, be in one of these garages or one of these houses. Do you mind us taking a look around, so forth and so on?" And I said, "No, not in my house." You know what I mean? And now that could have been a situation. Well, I knew I wasn't hiding anything. I didn't have anything in my house that I needed to be concerned about. But I knew my constitutional rights, and I also knew I didn't want the police in my house. So I think it's a fine line between, being respectful and being cooperative. And so, yeah, while you don't want to tell people they can ignore law enforcement or they don't have to stop, because, that very action within itself could trigger another reaction from an over and aggressive police officer, right? But, I guess it's a fine line, because, you could go over there and all of a sudden an encounter which would seemingly be harmless turns into a stop and frisk, right? Just saying hello, and all of a sudden you got your hands on the wall and they got their hands in your pockets. And who's to say that Officer Friendly won't put something in your pocket?
Absolutely, it is so crazy. And me and Nate was talking earlier, and Corey, I'm a little older, and we didn't have camera phones when I was 15, 16 years old. And I grew up in Louisville, Mississippi, and on Highway 15 and some of the other areas, it was notorious for my classmates to come to school on Monday morning with a black eye because no police report or anything like that, but they encountered police officers and they were getting rough. And so what we had to do in Mississippi was we had classes on young men who would go to the community centers, and officers would come in uniform and tell us how not to get beat the hell down and on steps to take. And he would, so he would give us, things to say, keep your hand on the steering wheel, keep the eyes forward, don't resist, all those type of things. And it was so bad at the time that even he said, hey, if I'm one of the people and I got another partner with me, don't point me out. Say, hey, I know you. And that's how bad it was, because we didn't have camera phones back then. But I think now, let me get Nate's opinion on this. Should we go back to doing those active classes and demand that the government support those instead of we having to do those under the cover of silence and darkness? Because when I remember it was about 30 of us in a room, and when that officer walked in uniform, it wasn't like, hey, Officer Friendly, it was a gas. Because we knew that when we saw, as young black men, when we saw an officer, no matter if it was right or wrong, it was not going to be a good experience with us. So do you think, what do you recommend? Should we start doing those classes again, or what do you recommend?
I think the community as a whole should, have the responsibility of helping other individuals in the community understand the fragility of life and, how different encounters can go sideways. But no, I wouldn't put it on the government to educate us on how to protect ourselves when the government engages in reckless and aggressive and abusive behavior. We shouldn't have to have that conversation. They should not engage in this abusive, aggressive, and reckless behavior to begin with. So maybe they should be the ones receiving the training on how to interact with us as citizens, right? The onus should not be on us, members of our community, to, make them comfortable. They need to be making us comfortable.
and you're so right, because I was pulled over in South Carolina a few months ago, and and I'm a black guy. I'm a good 250 solid, And when the little officer came up and Shawnee was in the truck, he was shaking so hard that the little things on his hat was almost vibrating.
So
And
he was nervous.
He was nervous. Him nervous make me nervous. Like, oh shit, you know, he got a gun, and so and there's nothing you can do. There's no training that he can have to not make him scared as hell of me. You know, because of my skin color and size. You know, so he can go to college of how not to be a punk. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? But he's still gonna be a punk. And so my brother looked at me because he officer over here. You know, but I'm saying not all police officers are bad. And like my brother-in-law told me yesterday. And for the most part, most officers do the right thing. But those few bad apples, you know, can ruin lives. And those few bad apples are mostly directed toward us. And so if you got a gun with if you got 10 bullets in it, I tell you what, you got a gun with 100 bullets in it, and you say, hey, 99 of them are blank, but there's one real bullet in there. You know, I want you to hold this gun and pull the trigger. You ain't gonna pull that trigger. It is not acceptable for it is not acceptable for one crooked officer to be on the police force because I'm paying his damn salary. You know, so how am I gonna pay you to abuse me? And so you're supposed to be protecting and serving me. If you're not doing that, you're supposed to be fired. And so we need more control over who polices us and the boundaries. Mr. Patrick.
So first and foremost, I mean, policing is a hard job.
Yes, it is.
You know, there's nothing easy about it. And you know, just speaking in regards to the encounter that you had with that law enforcement officer, you know, he's been trained on how to de-escalate. He's been trained to not be nervous, but yet he was still nervous.
Right.
So I have a lot of respect for law enforcement officers because they come into contact with life or death situations every day of the week.
Yes,
and if they react one way versus another way, they could either A, lose their life, they could either B, be seriously injured, or they could either C, do something that's the opposite side of the law and cause themselves to be in legal jeopardy. So, you know, they have a lot to navigate and a lot to deal with. And us as individuals, you know, we have to be knowledgeable and understanding of that. But like you said, being that it is such a hard job, I do think the community should have input as to, you know, what law enforcement officers are on the streets and have some input as to what the requirements should be for you to become a law enforcement officer.
Absolutely.
Because any Joe Blow should not be given a badge and a gun and tasked with, you know, enforcing the laws in any particular state or community.
I do like the one point that you made, Mr. Fitzpatrick, is putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I think you said that about yourself when you deal with clients, and what you just talked about as citizens, doing the same thing for a police officer, and the same thing goes with police officers. So I think all of that helps us understand what another person is going through.
Absolutely. You know, and like Corey said, you know, this show is about winning life. And, you know, I know we talk about relationships and stuff and finances and all that, but I wanted to take this show today to let people know, hey, attorneys are real people, and that you have to get to know your attorney, get a relationship with them. I recommend every family have a family attorney that they go to, somebody they know and trust. That's why I brought the best attorney in Atlanta here. So if you're in the Atlanta area, please, you know, look this brother up. And also, and just a reminder that we talk about win life. You can lose life or set your life back real quick with the wrong lawyer, or you said the wrong thing, and that can really hinder you. So that's why, you know, we cover all the topics about winning life So that's why that we decided that this was a very important topic. And we're gonna give the floor to you because Moose saying, "Hey, wrap it up 3 times," and so it's on you, brother. And then I'll let you close out.
Absolutely. I just want to give a quick advice about winning life when it comes to legal representation. When you're choosing a lawyer, you want to choose somebody who's competent,
Mm-hmm.
A, who's B, accessible, and C, who you can trust, right? If you got a competent attorney that you can access, that you can trust, that should be enough for you to feel comfortable hiring that individual. And if either one of those 3 things is missing, you need to go to somebody else. Because they're missing a key part of what you need for your particular situation. My firm, the Fitzpatrick Firm, we're in Atlanta. We are in Buckhead. We can be reached at 678-607-5550. We specialize in personal injury, wrongful death, car accident, motor vehicle accident, slip and fall cases. We also have a criminal component, and we help individuals when they are faced with situations where they're facing criminal charges as well. If you guys need anything from me in the future, I'd love to come back and help out, answer any questions, and I look forward to subscribing to you guys and listening to the podcast in the future.
All right, thank you so much, man. It's so cool to be able to talk to just a lawyer and just
I have a lawyer.
Hey, we got a lawyer. Hey, in Win Life, you have a lawyer too. You in Atlanta, you have a lawyer. Please, we always have to give tools. That's the tool we're gonna walk away from. He's competent, accessible, and you can trust him. So, and that Mr. Fitzpatrick is Moose. Until the next time, we're gonna wrap up. And from here on, we want you to go out there and win life. Moose, wrap us up.